Disability in popular media shapes how audiences understand and engage with the lived experiences of disabled people. In the musical Wicked, Nessa Rose, a character born with paraplegia, serves as a key figure in the story's exploration of power, love, and identity. However, her portrayal is fraught with ableist stereotypes, problematic narratives, and a lack of agency, which ultimately undermine the potential for an empowering and nuanced representation of disability. So in today's video, I'm going to unpack about how Nessa Rose's characterisation reflects societal biases about disability, and how her role could be reimagined to better honour the complexities of disabled experiences, both in the movie that was just released, but especially in the upcoming Part 2. Let's start by focusing on the source content first, the character of Nessa Rose as portrayed in the musical Wicked.
Part 1. Nessa Rose's disability as a source of tragedy. Nessa Rose is introduced as a character whose disability fundamentally shapes her relationships and self-perception. From the beginning, she is portrayed as pitiful and dependent, relying on her sister Elphaba for emotional support and constant care. This framing perpetuates the common trope of the tragic disabled person, wherein a character's disability is presented as their defining feature and their primary, and often only, source of their suffering. For Nessa Rose, this is compounded by her social isolation and unrequited love for Bock, a character who views her with pity rather than genuine affection. The Wicked script isn't subtle in the slightest, with regular lines referring to Nessa as tragic. The word that most accurately describes every other character's attitude towards Nessa is pity. Glinda pities Nessa Rose when she asks Bock to invite her to the dance, yet she doesn't know a single thing about Nessa at this point in the musical and hasn't had a single conversation with her, meaning she sees a girl in a wheelchair and just assumes that her life is tragic. Bock pities Nessa to the extent of maintaining a fabricated relationship with her to the detriment of his well-being. And even the character who is the least ableist towards her, Elphaba, reinforces ableist stereotypes by expressing feelings that she cursed Nessa to be disabled. The narrative links Nessa Rose's unhappiness and eventual moral downfall to her physical condition, reinforcing the stereotype that disability inevitably leads to bitterness or villainy. Her insecurities and need for control are implicitly tied to her disability, perpetuating ableist ideas that disabled people are incomplete or overly reliant on others. Rather than exploring how societal ableism and discrimination contribute to her struggles, the musical centres Nessa Rose's disability as the root cause of her discontent, rather than the ableist world around her. Part 2. The problematic cure narrative. One of the most contentious aspects of Nessa Rose's storyline is Elphaba's decision to enchant a pair of shoes that enable Nessa Rose to walk. While this moment is initially framed as an act of love and empowerment, it carries troubling implications. The notion that Nessa Rose's life improves solely through the curing of her disability enforces that ableist idea that physical differences must be fixed for a person to achieve happiness or self-worth. This plot point overlooks the possibility of portraying Nessa Rose as a strong and empowered disabled individual who does not need to be cured to lead a fulfilling life. By presenting walking as the ultimate solution to her struggles, the narrative reduces her worth to her physical abilities rather than embracing her disability as a meaningful and integral part of her identity. The trope of curing disabilities can also foster unrealistic expectations among audiences, particularly non-disabled viewers. These portrayals encourage able-bodied individuals to view disability as a temporary condition rather than a permanent identity, leading to harmful assumptions about what disabled people should aspire to. Especially in the case of those with incurable disabilities such as Nessa, who has paraplegia, this trope contributes to a lack of understanding about the diverse experiences of disabled individuals, including those who actively reject the idea of a cure for their condition. As somebody myself who has an incurable disability, my focus has never been on finding a miracle solution, but rather on self-advocating for the acceptance and accessibility I need to navigate the world. I would argue that most disabled people with an incurable condition wouldn't be yearning for a cure in the way Nessa does throughout the musical, because we know it's impossible. Miraculous cures we see in movies and musicals, like Wicked, are offensive because it's such an inaccurate portrayal of disability and is a portrayal made to bring comfort and relief to abled viewers. Part 3. Dependency and the burdensome stereotype. Another problematic aspect of Nessa Rose's representation is her characterization as emotionally dependent and overbearing. Her relationship with Bock in particular is emblematic of the burdensome disabled person trope. Nessa's romantic obsession with Bock leads her to use her newfound mobility as a tool of manipulation, enchanting him to stay with her against his will. This act frames her as desperate for love and willing to resort to unethical behaviour to avoid rejection. While Nessa Rose's desire for love and acceptance is relatable, the portrayal of her actions reinforces harmful stereotypes that depict disabled individuals as clingy, controlling, or overly reliant on others. This one-dimensional characterization fails to acknowledge the broader societal barriers that contribute to her feelings of inadequacy, instead attributing her flaws to personal shortcomings linked to her disability. Nessa is not treated with the dignity she deserves throughout the show. Although we don't hear any blatant ableist statements, such as characters mocking her for being in a wheelchair, we do see physical portrayals. For example, several characters push her wheelchair without asking or without warning, sometimes against her will. For an able-bodied audience member, they may not immediately identify this as an issue or as ableist, but you've got to think of it as the able-bodied equivalent of someone picking you up and carrying you somewhere without your consent. It's invasive, and it's taking away our autonomy. But the worst part about this portrayal is that these actions aren't taken as a portrayal of ableism, but are neutral stage directions not intended to mean anything. The musical normalises the act of pushing a wheelchair user without their consent, which is problematic. Part 4. Lack of narrative agency. Despite her central role in the story, Nessa Rose is largely sidelined in the broader narrative of Wicked. Her character development is limited, and her arc serves primarily to advance the stories of Elphaba, Glinda, and Bock. This lack of narrative agency diminishes her significance as an independent character and reduces her role to that of a plot device. Nessa Rose's death, while pivotal to the Wizard of Oz canon, is abrupt and unresolved. The musical fails to explore the complexities of her character or offer meaningful commentary on her struggles. Her demise is framed as a necessary step in Elphaba's journey, reinforcing the notion that disabled characters exist primarily to serve the narratives of able-bodied protagonists. Part 5. Able-bodied actresses portraying the character. Despite being one of the very few disabled characters in musical theatre, Nessa has never been portrayed by an actress who is a wheelchair user. The practice of casting non-disabled actors in roles of disabled characters has faced growing criticism in recent years. While some argue that acting is about transformation and embodying experiences different from one's own, casting non-disabled actors in disabled roles perpetuates harmful practices, reinforces systemic inequities, and undermines authentic representation. Without lived experience, non-disabled actors may unintentionally reinforce disability stereotypes and cliches, contributing to a broader culture of misunderstanding and prejudice towards disabled communities. Additionally, by playing a disabled character, non-disabled actors are taking opportunities away from disabled actors, depriving them of the scarce opportunities to work and represent their own experiences. The practice also sends a harmful message, implying that disabled actors are not capable of playing even characters whose lives mirror their own, perpetuating the idea that disability itself is a limitation. Okay, but for Nessa Rose, there's an argument that her character gets cured in Act 2 and is able to walk, therefore the actress needs to be able-bodied. This is where the producers of Wicked need to create rewrites. For the reasons mentioned earlier, Nessa being cured is an offensive trope which needs to be removed. And additionally, by doing this, producers will open the door for a disabled person to get an opportunity that doesn't arise too often for our community. Nessa being cured is not integral to the plot and can easily be removed without causing issue, and I really don't understand why the producers of the musical haven't done it already. Part 6. Reimagining Nessa Rose's representation. To create a more nuanced and empowering portrayal of Nessa Rose, the recently released Wicked film and its second part coming next year have the opportunity to address these shortcomings. Several key changes could significantly improve her representation. Firstly, casting an actually disabled actress in the role. Marissa Bode is the first person who is actually a wheelchair user to portray the part of Nessa Rose, and that brings me so much joy to share. Marissa can use her lived experience to bring nuance and depth to a character who for too long has been one-dimensional. Next, the film needs to shift the focus to societal ableism. Rather than framing Nessa Rose's struggle as intrinsic to her disability, the story could highlight how societal attitudes and systemic barriers impact her sense of self and her relationships. The characterization of Nessa being frustrated by her limitations and feeling different to others is central to the plot, and this can and should still exist. But the causes of those feelings need to shift from internalized ableism to the societal ableism that has made the world harder for Nessa to navigate as a disabled person. Next, the movie needs to reject the cure trope. By reframing the enchanted shoes as a tool for self-expression or empowerment rather than a cure, the narrative could affirm that Nessa Rose's value and happiness are not contingent on her ability to walk. People have already been speculating how the producers will film part 2 of the movie with Nessa walking, considering Marissa Bode will not be able to do this herself. I'm holding up hope that instead of using a double and staying true to the source material, the producers use this as an opportunity to change Nessa's narrative for the better. Next, grant Nessa Rose greater agency. The film needs to expand her role in the political and emotional dynamics of the story and allow her to become a more fully realised character. This could include exploring her leadership as the governor of Munchkinland, or her efforts to navigate ableist prejudices in her position of power. Finally, the film needs to foster authentic relationships. Depicting Nessa Rose's relationships as mutual and grounded in respect, rather than pity or manipulation, would challenge stereotypes of disabled individuals as dependent or unlovable. In an interview, Ethan Slater, who portrays Bock, referred to his character's perception of Nessa to be a girl he really likes, but just doesn't love. In the musical, I got the impression that Bock never even liked Nessa, he just pitied her. But if what Ethan Slater has hinted to in his interview proves true in the movie, I think this would be a much nicer portrayal, showing the challenging dynamics of loving someone just as a friend versus them loving you romantically.
Nessa Rose's portrayal in the musical reflects many of the problematic narratives, stereotypes and tropes that shape disability representation in popular media. Presenting her disability as a source of tragedy, framing walking as a cure, and sidelining her narrative agency. The musical reinforces ableist assumptions that diminish her humanity. However, with thoughtful revisions and a commitment to authentic storytelling, the movie and future adaptations have the potential to transform the character of Nessa Rose, creating a multidimensional character who challenges stereotypes and resonates with disabled audience members. For me, Nessa Rose's portrayal has always put a damper on a musical that I genuinely really love. And if these essential changes are made, both in the films, but also in the productions we see on stage, Wicked could become a more inclusive and empowering narrative, and it could be changed for good. I had to. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe because I hope to do more long form content soon. And let me know in the comments, what videos do you want to see from me next?